Night.
You didn't have dinner yet?
You ready, ma'am? You ready, ma'am? Good evening. My name is Eric Bernstein. I am the planning board attorney for the Township of Hillsborough Planning Board. I apologize for the voice as well. It is December 4th, 2014 at 7:37 p.m. in the municipal courtroom. Call the meeting to order. Stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been given pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975. Notice being given in the Beacon and in the other appropriate official newspapers. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Wagner?
Here.
Mr. Julian?
Here.
Mr. Merdinger?
Here.
Committeeman Delcor?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Burchett?
Here.
Mr. Lapani?
Here.
And Chairman Cevici is not here.
Neither the chair or the vice chair are here this evening. They are both unavailable. Therefore, the first order of business, gentlemen, is the election of an acting chairman for the evening. It must come from a member of the body who is either a Class 4 or an alternate, which is Mr. Wagner, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Lapani.
I move Mr. Wagner.
Second.
Any other nominations? Hearing nominations closed. Roll call vote on the appointment of Robert Wagner as acting chairman of the Hillsborough Planning Board for this evening.
Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Merdinger?
Yes.
Committeeman Delcor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Burchett?
Yes.
Mr. Lapani?
Yes.
Mr.
Mr.
Wagner.
Wagner?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
I get to vote for myself up there. Okay, good evening. First order of business that we have this evening will be the minutes for the November 13th, 2014 meeting. Everybody has those in their packets. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Second. Okay.
All members available this evening are eligible.
Okay. So I guess we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Merdinger?
Yes.
Committeeman Delcor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Burchett?
Yes.
Mr. Lapani?
Yes.
Acting Chairman Wagner?
Yes. Next item of business, disposition of any of resolutions. I do not have any. Is that correct, Council?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to planning board business. First item that we have is Glengarry Corporation, which is file 14PB01MR, extension of time through February 14th of 2015. The request is until February 15th of 2015. Any further notice needed on those?
No.
No, not at this, okay.
Need a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Merdinger?
Yes.
Committeeman Delcor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Burchett?
Yes.
Mr. Lapani?
Yes.
Acting Chairman Wagner?
Yes. Next item is we have a draft report area need of rehabilitation, which is block 163.01, lots 101, lot 102, lot 103, 104, and 105. Presentation by Jennifer Beam, who I see is with us this evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Jennifer, talk to the mic.
How are you? So do we need a motion, or do we
No.
let her go? And welcome.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, public notice of this hearing has been made. It was submitted by the clerk through my direction to the appropriate newspapers. An affidavit of publication for such occurred both in the Courier and in the Beacon, and all parties have been duly noticed in accordance with all property owners have been duly noticed in accordance with the municipal land use law for this type of application.
Okay. Okay.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jennifer Beam. I'm the Director of Planning for CME Associates, and I've been handling the township's affordable housing work for several years now. Back in 2010, when we adopted our last housing element and fair share plan, we had a number of affordable housing sites included in our housing plan. One of those sites is the property, the subject property this evening, which is called, or we have consistently called it, New Amwell Associates. It's located on Amwell Road. In 2010, there was a proposal put in place for 85 market rate units, which was a mix of singles and townhouses. And then up front was a building that would house 20 apartments, affordable apartments, and 24 two-bedroom special needs housing units, which would result in the township receiving 68 affordable housing credits, because each bedroom qualifies as a credit in each of those special needs housing units. Subsequent to that adoption, and I will say the township went so far as to adopt zoning consistent with that plan pursuant to our housing plan, and we're almost in front of the court to get our plan certified when the rules were invalidated, and we kind of took a step back. Subsequent to that, we had been approached by the property owner as well as an affordable housing developer with respect to what the proposal was. And at this point in time, in order to qualify for funding through low-income tax credits, they would not fund 24 two-bedroom units. The Department of Health and Human Services and the DCA had modified how they were going to fund these supportive needs housing projects, and they would max out at 14 special needs one-bedroom units. As a result, they came back to us with an alternative proposal, which is 54 units in kind of an apartment building up front, 14 of which would be those supportive needs housing, which is really for developmentally disabled adults. The balance would be rental apartments, and in the rear of the property, consistent with the last plan, would be the market rate units. Now, instead of 85 units, we're talking 75 units. So at the end of the day, the total number of units on the property remains the same at 129. In addition to the modification of the proposal, in order for the affordable housing units to be competitive in the tax credit market, you have to apply for these tax credits. The location of the property in a redevelopment plan or on a redevelopment site would garner additional points in the tax credit application, which would help secure funding to solidify this project. So instead of doing what I would traditionally call a needs study or an in need of redevelopment, which I know you've done in other areas, one thing that this property would qualify for would be in need of rehabilitation designation. It gives you the same powers to adopt a redevelopment plan, which would be the next presentation, but the difference would be you can't enter into a long-term pilot. Under a redevelopment law, in a designated redevelopment area, you can enter into a long-term pilot. This is only a short-term 5-year pilot. And you can't use eminent domain, which we were not going to use anyway. The criteria is much lower for a rehab designation as opposed to a redevelopment designation. Instead of making a determination of blight, which has become much more difficult given recent case law, there's a set of criteria of which the property must meet one in order to meet this designation. And one is whether there's subsurface or substandard, I apologize, infrastructure, which the site does not have, whether the property is in tax arrears, which again the property does not have, or whether the housing stock is 50 years old or older. There's 4 houses on this property. They range in age from 63, I think, to about 83 years of age, so they all meet that criteria. There's one in which that is in pretty significant disrepair. Having those structures on this property, having them be more than 50 years old, automatically qualifies the property for this rehab designation. So as such, we had prepared a draft report for the Township Committee, who has then recommended it come before the Planning Board for your approval to designate the property in need of rehabilitation. That would be the first step. Once that's done, then we can move to the actual redevelopment plan, which will become the zoning for the property.
Okay. So what would we need to do now?
The first question, is there any questions of the board to Ms. Beam regarding her proposal.
So Jen, just so for clear for the record, can you just, as far as it impacts the overall affordable housing plan and what was set forth in 2010, how does what they're proposing now impact that, and does it create a deficiency in what we're obligated to do?
Okay, so the last plan, as I said, totaled out 129 units on the property. That was between the apartments, the special needs, and the market rate, the 85 market rate in the rear. That yielded the township 68 credits because of bonuses, et cetera. Here, we're coming in, we're capping out at the same number. That was kind of part of our negotiations where we're not entertaining anything beyond what we had envisioned on the property previously. So now we have 54 multifamily units, 14 of which are supportive needs housing, given a 2-for-1 credit. And I'm saying this speculatively because this will be a third-round site because it was in our third-round plan. And I don't know if all of you are aware, but the proposed rules that we had discussed over the summer into the fall were not acted upon by COA. In fact, they kind of hit a stalemate and then nothing happened. And then the deadline with the court has passed. So I don't really know what the status of those rules will be. I'm envisioning seeing some alternative iteration at some point moving forward. I don't, however, think that they would remove the rental bonus credits. It's been a very consistent piece throughout rounds 1 and 2. If they maintain those rental bonuses, which I'm assuming they will, this site could potentially yield us 108 credits. So it's keeping the number of total units the same, but giving us potential 108 credits as opposed to the 68 that we were realizing before.
Thank you.
So it's more better.
Hopefully.
Jen, can you put the map up on
Sure.
the wall so that people know where it is?
You want me to mark it?
Yeah, I would think
Yeah, it
the
has to
mic
be
with you
marked.
too.
Can I steal your pen for a second? Yeah. So I basically, what do you want me to mark it, Eric?
Exhibit 1, E1.
E1.
E1. So I know it's a little hard to see, but the site itself is a little less than 24 acres and it fronts on Amwell Road. It's the same site that was in our 2010 housing plan that was approved by the board.
So its location is across from Pleasant View Road,
Yes,
and it's on this side of 206.
yes.
Because maybe the board remembers it, but people in the audience and on TV don't. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for Mr. Harris from the board?
Open it to the public.
Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open for public comments.
So moved.
Is there a second?
All in favor?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take public comments. Gentlemen in the, yes, please come up to the mic, state your name and address for the record, please.
William Trethaway, 1274 Millstone River Road,
Okay.
here in Hillsborough.
Sir, I don't think your mic is on.
Is it on or?
Switching this.
One-
Yeah, you can just use this.
Yeah, maybe that.
William Trethaway, 1274 Millstone River Road, here in Hillsborough.
Can you spell your last name, sir, for the record?
Trethewey.
Okay, good.
Okay, I have a question. Is this actually the hearing for the need for redevelopment at this time? Determine need for redevelopment?
Okay, so technically no, because the site is being designated in need of rehab. It's not being designated in need of
Okay,
redevelopment.
so the hearing for being
Yes.
designated rehabilitation? Okay. And when was the publication published in the papers? You know, dated the papers, but I didn't catch the date.
November 17th and November 25th.
Thank you. Okay, so I heard a lot of talk of COA. And I don't believe that COA is one of the considerations that you're allowed to consider for redevelopment. It's not in the ordinance. It's not one of the items that identifies as need for
I think this is
rehabilitation.
a,
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that It's not atypical for an affordable housing site to be put in a redevelopment area. That, I'm not saying that that's what I use for the designation, and I want to be very clear. We're not designating this in need of redevelopment. We're designating this in need of rehabilitation. And all we have to prove to meet that designation is that the housing stock on the site is 50 years old or older, which it is.
Yes, I also, though, heard talk of COA.
Correct, because this is an affordable.
I believe that rehabilitation for COA purposes is not allowed specifically for COA. I understand that you are saying that it is because the houses are 50 years old.
I think you're mixing.
However, if you go to Elon versus Howell 2004, the Honorable Judge Larson's in Monmouth County Superior Court did rule that discussion of COA as a redevelopment or rehabilitation is not proper.
Okay, I think you're mixing things up. What I'm saying is that ultimately this is going to be an affordable housing site. Regardless of what goes there, the site meets the criteria. These houses are 50 years old or older.
I agree.
And I will say, because I work for Howell and I was involved in that case, so I'm very intimately familiar in what goes on in Howell. We're talking about apples and oranges here.
I knew you at that time.
Yeah, we're talking about designating this property, block 16305, lots 101 through 105, in need of rehabilitation, not in need of redevelopment. And that Elon site, for the record, is not a redevelopment area. So
I know.
It's not apples to apples.
So rehabilitation, all right.
And this is not saying this is going towards our rehab obligation. This is under the local housing and redevelopment law, is one of those methods that has in the past not been utilized as often because of the limitations that I had described earlier in the short-term tax abatement and the lack of ability to use eminent domain, but has become more prevalent in current years because of the difficulty in designating a property blighted under the redevelopment law and the case law that has come along in the past several years about redevelopment areas. This site, regardless of what the ultimate user would be, meets the criteria for rehab because the housing stock is 50 years old or older. Has nothing to do with COA. The fact that it came to us through this method is perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
Okay. This site is already in the master plan as an affordable housing designated area, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so. Now, in the previous development that you were working on that had gone through the court cases and everything, what were the number of market value units?
85.
85. And what's the number now?
75.
75. Okay, so it's a much better mix, which is a good thing to have on there. Do you, strike that, I'm not sure where I want to get, what I want to say next. I was going to ask some questions about what's your next step, your process, what you plan to do, but I'd like to reserve the right to make comments later if you have more time.
If that comes up and we have public, yes, you'll have the
Thank you.
ability to do that. Thank you. Any other from this? So? Just come up, you can use the portable microphone, just state your name and address for the record if you would.
Susan Gulliford, Gulliford, Hunt Club Road. I have a question. I was here in 2000, I guess it was 9. At the time it was called Amaral Road West. It was 29.3 acres. Why is it 24 now? Was there a change from that initial report you made?
23.48 acres.
Right.
I'm just basing it on the information that I'm being provided.
Oh, so, okay. Another thing, I'm trying to understand, where's the cemetery on this lot?
It's not on this lot.
It's not on the lot? Oh,
No.
okay, thank you. The houses that are already there in need of rehabilitation, I know one of them should have been knocked down years
Yes.
ago and never was. I don't know why their insurance company didn't just take care of that. Don't townships get credits for rehabilitating houses that are already there that could use rehabilitation?
They have to
Some
meet
kind of
certain
program?
criteria. The occupants have to be income qualified, and there are certain criteria. These houses were never identified as satisfying our affordable housing rehab obligation. That's being handled elsewhere. This was always a new construction site, and I do have to correct you, in our 2010 housing plan, the acreage is consistent 23.48.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Yes, gentlemen. And just state your name and address for the record, if you would, please.
Amadeo Diadamo.
Can you spell your last name?
113 Renate Drive. If I may take a moment to hand you a
Sir,
map.
excuse me, I'm sorry. Can you
May
just,
I?
yes, but first, can you spell your last name for the record, please?
Sure. D''A, D as in David, A-M-O, Junior.
Okay, thank you. And your question?
It's part of Got it. Well,
You'll have to speak, you'll have to use the microphone, sir.
this is a copy of a letter that I sent on November 11th, 2010, to Mayor Frank Delcor and the following people who are presently on the planning board. Greg Burchett, Michael Merdinger, Steve Cohen, Sam Kennard, Dr. Stephen Seary Jr., and Robert Wagner. Now, in this letter, I expressed my concern about what was going to be done with that property, because where I live adjoins part of that property. So I came to that meeting. I agreed that we needed moderate income of housing and so on. But what I wanted to find out was what was going to happen to the brook, whether our property, and you would know the answer to that, if you would open the map, please. Whose property is that?
I have no idea.
What's that?
I don't know who it is. It's off the subject. Just so that the record is clear, there was a pointing to an adjacent property along the creek that's not on the subject site.
Okay, so it's not on.
Oh,
It's off the subject site.
All right. Okay, so the only other thing I want to say is the following. I was assured by Mayor Delcor, and I sent the same letter to all the people on the planning board and the Board of Adjustment, but I was assured that we would be totally informed as to what was going to occur in that property. Now, of course, legally, apparently, all you have to do is put it in a newspaper, and that assumes, of course, people read that portion of the newspaper. So what I'm looking at is the fact that I don't see the transparency for the people whose land and housing surrounds that area. So I want to ask, before any plan is settled, are we going to be informed by mail so that we will be able to come and express our feelings?
Yeah, this is just a designation for the property. Whatever takes place on that property will have to come before this board and get subdivision and site plan approval. That process requires notice of the adjoining property owners within 200 feet. So if your property is within 200 feet of this site, we're not at that point yet. That's way down the road. When that happens, you will get notice in the mail for this, and then you will have the ability to come to this hearing at that time, and the public has the opportunity to ask questions and make comments at that time.
So,
And that plan will be drawn up?
Yes, I don't, I mean, that we're not there yet. This is really just designating the property and creating some zoning. Then, after that process is completed, then plans will be prepared for the subdivision of the property. Probably the affordable component will have one site plan approval, and then the subdivision approval in the rear. Regardless, that process requires notice. It requires notice in the newspaper as well as to adjoining property owners.
Okay, and then I have just a couple of other
well,
comments.
can I address, though, because you singled me out, so I want to make sure on the record that I respond to what you said. So, I don't remember our conversation if we had one. If I responded to you in a letter, then, but the issue from a notice perspective is exactly as Ms. Beam just indicated it there. We have a legal requirement as to how we notice people, and if there is a development that is going to go on that site, we will be sure to meet all of our legal requirements. It's explicitly spelled out, and we will meet that. So I will again assure you that if you are within the notification process and a development is going there, you will be notified. This today, though, is not that.
All right, thank you. But I just have two comments. Of the material that was in the public area. One is that in terms of the moderate income housing, according to what is in this document, the parking will be per unit.
I don't think we're not at that.
0.5
We're not at that
cars.
point yet. I don't think. Is that correct?
Okay,
Eric,
so
as far as
This-
I
this
mean,
is the-
realistically,
This is for the next step.
yeah, this is for the next.
So-
What you're asking for is for the next step that I believe that we have this evening.
okay, well
So it
then
would-
fine.
so-
My comments are
Yeah,
ended.
we'll have an opportunity to.
Thank
ask
you.
questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this side of the room? I'm assuming yes if you're walking up? Yes. Okay. Usually I ask you to raise your hand, but I saw you get up, so come on up. Just state your name and address for the record if you would, please.
Jim Bergstrom, 78 Wurtsville Road in Hillsborough.
Spell your last name, Mr. Burke.
B as in boy, E-R-G-S-T-R-O-M. I'm a little confused on the property. I went to your engineering department and got the tax map. Hillsborough has the lots on here. When I add up the 5 dimensions here, I come up with 21.88 acres, not this 23.6. And then also earlier, the newspaper reports on this in 2010, it talked about 29.3 acres. Has anything changed in the lots that were considered as part of this plan earlier in 2010? Is it still just, was it just 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105 then? Or were there other lots involved in this earlier?
It's the same property. The lot and block numbers have changed since 2010. Historically, it was block 163, lots 8 through 12. I guess there's been a change in your tax maps, and so therefore now it's block 16305, lots 101 through 105, but it's the same property. The property has been consistently in our plan as 23.48 acres, and it remains at 23.48. I don't know where the 29 acres came from.
We're not responsible for what the papers report, sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make
it's the
sure.
same.
I was confused because I saw
Yeah.
the difference, and I just wanted
Yeah,
to make
no,
sure there
and
was
it
no
was
change
in
in
the plan,
that.
it was designated
Yeah.
what it was.
When you're done, I would be interested in trying to get difference in the math that I'm getting here and what you have
I mean,
there.
I think the difference is that the tax maps are not always as accurate as like a survey.
Okay.
So that generally in many instances is an explanation as what the difference is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the public? Young lady in the back. Just come up, state your name and address for the record, if you would, please. You have to use the microphone on the
Here you
table,
go.
please.
Merrill Bisberg, 4 Hickory Hill Road, previously 303 Gemini Drive, which very close to that property.
Spell your last name, ma'am, please, for the record.
B as in boy, ISBERG.
Thank you.
I would just, I would like it if there is in some report something about a wetlands area that's already designated. Could you show on that map which part, how many acres there are?
I don't know how many acres are. There's a stream that runs along the rear of the property that has buffering and wetlands associated with it. At the time that the back portion is developed, the developer is going to have to go out and delineate the wetlands and get an LOI from the DEP and conform with all the applicable state regulations when they prepare their development plan. So at this point, I know that there's, I don't have this. I can rip it out and make it an exhibit. You want me to do that?
I have one I could probably give you.
I mean,
I will
What do you
note
want,
that as
E2?
exhibit E2.
Yeah.
Why don't you identify what E2 is, Jennifer?
E2 is an environmental constraints map, and it's based upon, it was part of the 2010 Housing Element and Fair Share Plan, and it's based on the state's GIS data, which is a general guide as to where the environmental constraints are on the property. So we're going to call this E2. If you look at this exhibit, I'll just show the board quickly. This is just a color exhibit of the site, and it shows the environmental constraints on the property, which really are coincident to.
We're for the television,
Yep.
Pete. Over for the happy lady
You got it?
with the Fairleigh Dickinson.
If you look at this aerial photograph, you'll see that the rear of the property maintains some of the environmental constraints. I don't want to say that this is an exact line because, like I said, it's based on GIS data. It would be incumbent upon the developer of the market rate units, which will be put in the rear of this property, ultimately, if this is voted on in the affirmative, to go through those steps with the DEP. But nothing that we're doing here would absolve anybody from getting the required DEP permits and maintaining the requisite buffers and what have you.
Except that because there's a number of units designated. And
Well, that's a max.
We know.
That's
yeah.
a max. So that doesn't give them the right to develop in wetlands, and they certainly aren't going to get approvals from the DEP to do things that are not not permitted, and they still have to come before this board and get a subdivision approval. And I would venture to guess, although I don't represent this board for site plan subdivision matters, but that any development would be conditioned upon getting the requisite DEP permits and approval. So
Well, that's the law.
nothing that we're doing here would absolve them of having to go through that process.
Correct.
Okay. All right, and the other question is, just going back to the code a little bit. I think I was here in 2010, and you presented, and there was an expectation at that time that when Green Village was zoned, we would end up with a resultant 191 COA units that we're obligated to for the phase 3.
I think the questions have to be related to what we're talking about, and Green Village is not what we're talking about.
But I will just say, for the record, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
if I might,
Sure.
that those numbers are absolutely not correct.
Okay.
Our round 3, our prior regulation round 3 obligation was 473 units,
Okay.
or 475, I'm sorry.
Okay, so, so what you did say at the time was exclusions and credits allowed by the court special master, resulting mainly from the Green Village project and the projected Gateway at Sunnymede, both of which have been developed or underdeveloped.
If you can
Enables
keep the
township-
questions, excuse me, if you can keep the questions, we're
Okay.
not talking about Green Village.
Well, my question, I guess my...
So if it's a question about the number of units for what we're talking about, that's fine. But we're
It
not
is.
talking about Green
Because
Village.
what I'm getting to is that if this 191 hasn't been accepted, I know you mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that there were some issues with...
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Yeah, you have to hold it up.
I know you mentioned in the beginning of the presentation there were issues with COA. So if the 191 isn't clear, and the number, whatever number is not clear, that means we probably don't really know if we'll actually get 108 credits for this either. So that's really where I'm going. How do we go forward, not knowing really what's coming out of COA?
So I just-
Is your question because the regulations are not fixed at this point? How do we know what that means?
Yeah, is this the time for a COA?
No.
based development.
Well, I will tell you that number one, this site is in your affordable housing plan now for the
Right.
same number of units that we're talking about moving forward. Not one hot unit more. Secondly, I will tell you that we had an obligation of 475 in the last go around. The new rules that came out that hadn't been acted on, our number was up at 800. So it's almost double what we were anticipating. So, and I don't anticipate that it's going to be less than 475 under any circumstances. That's good. That is that absolute minimum that we would be required to comply with. And this site yielded 68 credits towards that 475 obligation in 2010. Now we have the ability to yield 108 credits from this site, which will help towards meeting some of that additional obligation, which is very likely to come here. So this is not a new site to affordable housing. This was in our plan. It was and I don't know where your 191 unit number comes from, because that was never our obligation. It was always 475.
It's on the township, that's from the township website.
Okay, well, I mean,
Are you presenting that into evidence, or are you just?
May as
Eric,
well.
I mean, do we have to note that in
I
there,
mean-
Eric, or what?
The point being is that we already have a plan.
you're not reading
This
this right.
property was part of the plan,
You're not reading this right.
and what we're doing tonight is not affecting our COA issue. What we're doing tonight is simply to deal with what the planned development, the changes that are doing there, and the rehabilitation process that Jennifer talked about.
Jennifer, if you could tell the public what you found, so.
Yeah, if you look at that, I mean, that's a press release, and if you read through it, it starts out saying that we've added another 105 units to this number, but if you read down, it says that the obligation is, I mean, I can read the statement. It basically says that this is really to do more with the Green Village Preserve, so it really doesn't deal with this site, but it deals with the fact that it's between the Gateway at Sunnymead conversion enables the township to further reduce the COA obligation to 475, which results in 191 units, not credits. So it's a 475 credits. So it's not, it's apples and oranges. And we've gone through
credit,
this
not
with this
units.
board before, because you get bonuses for certain things and reductions for other things. So that's where that's coming from. But this site has always been in our plan to meet that 475.
Okay, so just from a numbers perspective, we have 475. What is our obligation in terms of units?
Okay, Mr. Chair, now I have to kind of ask. This
Yeah,
is not an
it's-
affordable, this is not a fair
Yeah,
share,
it's-
this is not a
it's-
housing element fair share
Again, I have to
hearing.
remind you, it's question specific.
Okay.
It's not
Let me ask
questions
you.
on COA and what our number for the township is. It's for this specific, so if you can keep the direction of your questions specific
To the
this
action we're taking.
particular
So
property
we
is
have
fine.
108 credits against, that we expect to get against what? I guess that's all I'm asking. Against what number?
Some number greater than
Some number that
475.
they've told us it's between 475
And 800.
potentially 800. So until they tell us what number that is, pick one. I mean, it's not, we don't know.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Yes. State your name and address for the record, please.
Howie Greenberg, 904 Merritt Drive.
Your last name, Mr. Greenberg, for the record.
Greenberg.
Thank you, sir.
I happen to live off Marshall Road in Somerset Park. And I'd like to know, before this is approved, do you do a traffic study? Because I understand there's only going to be one road going on to Amwell
I think
Road.
I understand what you're asking, Howard. We're not at that point yet. We're not at that point. This is
Oh,
just,
okay, this is-
we're talking about an area that we're talking about rehabilitation, not traffic studies, not types of houses and shrubbery. We're
The
not there
next
yet.
steps will be site plan.
Site plans, they're coming,
And
but
that's
they're
when
not.
that-
not
that's when
yet.
that'll
That's when, that's what
Oh,
we're
okay.
asking about.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Any other questions from the public this evening? Yes. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Ray Clevitis, 690 Township Line Road in Hillsborough, spelling of the last name Kolvites.
Thank you, sir.
I'm new to this, so I'm just getting a sense of it right now. But you made a comment that there's a certain amount of credits that we get for lower income and people that are disabled. Okay, and I don't know if this is the right time for that, but can we increase those credits? Can we increase the number of housing for the disabled to get more credits?
No.
Now, why is that?
The affordable housing projects, especially those that are 100% affordable, which this piece would be subdivided off in 100% affordable, relies upon tax credit dollars to fund the projects. And we initially had 24 two-bedroom supportive needs housing units in this project. They won't fund it. They cap out at 14, and that's what we're maxing out at.
Can you apply for more?
No.
Or are there any avenues that can be researched to get more? For example, you have housing 14 units for the handicapped. Okay, we have a drastic need for that type of housing, and there's nothing very little being done with regards to that.
In this project, that's the max, and they won't fund one unit more. That's not to say, and we've discussed this at prior hearings, that there's a number of supportive needs housing homes located throughout Hillsborough, and we've taken credit for the bedrooms in those units. I think there's probably 15 or 16 located throughout the township, and they're like 3 and 4 bedrooms for developmentally disabled adults, which the township has received credit for, or is in the process of receiving credit for. This project is capped at 14, and they won't fund one more unit.
Now, when you mentioned before about not knowing how much credits we're going to be getting, is that something that shouldn't be decided on before you make a decision now, or not?
So this is not the housing plan. I know the reason that we're here is because this site was in our housing plan and continues to stay there, but this is not the master plan hearing for the housing element fair share plan. At some point in the future, when the rules roll out and we revise the plan consistent with the new rules, we'll have a public hearing at that point on all the different mechanisms and methods that the township is going to utilize to meet its obligation. Historically, the state has struggled over the past several years in formulating regulations for, we call this round 3. This started in the mid-'80s, and technically round 3 was supposed to start in 1999. It is still in a state of flux. This is the third strike, I think, as far as the state's concerned with respect to trying to roll out regulations that haven't been overturned by the court. Every iteration of those regulations, the rounds 1 and 2, which have been upheld, as well as the 3 attempts at round 3, have always given a 2-for-1 bonus for rental units for families. And we anticipate that to be consistent moving forward. So that being said, when you have 54 units, you would get 2-for-1 credits, so you would get 108 credits. The past project proposal was 20 apartments and 24 two-bedroom supportive needs housing units, each bedroom receiving credit. So we were receiving 68 credits under those rules, which allowed for the 2-for-1 bonus. So I feel confident in my experience in saying that those rental bonuses will remain, and the likelihood is that the township will be able to receive 108 credits. At the very minimum, the township will receive 54 credits, because that's as if it's a 1-for-1. Right. But at the end of the day, I feel very confident in the fact that we're going to receive 2-for-1 credit. Also in keeping with the fact that we are a court town, so this has to be approved by the court and the special master, and she's been working with us very closely and is supportive of the 2-for-1 bonus for those units. So the likelihood is that will result in 108 credits.
So can you lower the number? I have a concern because of the school system, okay? We continuously bring more and more developments in, more and more kids into the township. I mean, I was in the township when there was only maybe 1,000 people in the whole township.
Greg, I understand,
okay,
I understand where you're going, but you have to direct
But I'm saying that, yeah, but what I'm getting at is...
We're not talking about kids in schools. We're talking about what we're talking about.
Okay,
so do you have a question related to the specific units numbers, then please direct that.
Can you lower the 3 bedrooms and add more 2 bedrooms, or add more 1 bedrooms and still get the same credits?
No, the bedroom distribution is set by the DCA regulation. A maximum of units, of 20% of the units, can be 1 bedroom, a maximum. A minimum of 20% has to be 3 bedroom, a minimum. And the balance are 2 bedrooms, and that's the mix that they're using. So they're complying with the DCA regs. We don't have the authority to modify that.
Now, what about the standard housing? Can that be modified?
The market rate housing is not regulated under that, but you're going to have single-family homes and you're going to have townhouses. And again, I don't have any information with respect to what the bedroom distribution on that is, because they're market rate housing. And when we get to this stage, which is the next stage tonight, one of the items that we've incorporated into the redevelopment plan is that market rate development has to pay the 1% development fee to the township's trust fund. But they will come before this board for a subdivision approval, and at that time, whoever the developer is, because right now I'm really just dealing with the property owner, will be available to answer your questions on the bedroom distribution for the market rate units. At this point, it's premature. What we're doing right now is we're just designating the site in need of rehab, and then the next phase of it is just establishing the zoning. There's no development application proposed at this point.
Yeah,
Okay,
you'll
so
get a
in the
chance
next, so in the next phase, I could be
You'll
asking
get a
that question.
chance to, yes.
Yes.
And is that something that can be altered?
Like I said, for
Or
the
is it
affordable,
set in stone already?
No, for the affordable units, like I said, the bedroom distribution is set by regulation. For the market rate units, that's up to the board and the developer and whatever comes through that subdivision process.
Okay, I'll wait for them comments for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the public? You've already come up, Susan. I mean, I think everybody's gotten a fair shot. I mean, Eric, do I have to have people come up a second time? I'm sorry? I mean,
Let her come,
all right, come up, Susan. I said Susan, you can come up after. Bill, I said ask Susan to come up. Now everybody wants to come up again.
Ladies before.
Okay, Susan. I don't think you are, but that's okay.
Susan Gulliford, Gulliford.
Okay.
Make life easier. Two of your comments during your presentation. There's several owners on this property. You said there would be no eminent domain. Do we have like some kind of an option that goes along with this?
You can't use eminent domain with the rehab designation. It's illegal. So there's no ability for the town to use eminent domain.
So we would be assuming all the property owners would be willing to sell the property, or that somebody has an option on it. And the second thing, you said something about a long-term...
Sorry. No, I said use the microphone, sorry.
Something about a long-term pilot. Is that a tax credit?
You
Like
can't
we
use
just went through?
because we're doing a rehab, not an need of redevelopment. There's no ability to enter into a long-term pilot. It's illegal.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said there was
No.
one. Thank you.
Now the gentleman in the red shirt would like to come up for a second bite at the apple. Please do so.
I just have a couple of questions about the process. I do want to make a comment that I don't think there's anybody who doesn't deserve a good place to live, and that COA is in general a fairly good thing. It sometimes puts what appears to be high burdens on towns, but people do need a place to live, and I'm not against that, at least. I don't think very many people are. Another question on the process I didn't quite understand. A rehabilitation plan requires the same hearing as redevelopment plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, it doesn't, quite honestly. It really just requires a resolution from the governing body. So the fact that we're even going through this process for the rehab designation is really attempt to incorporate, to be.
We're all about
Sure about
transparency.
No, we are required to have a hearing.
I think you're required to have a
We
hearing.
are required to have a hearing for the area in need of rehab, and you're required to have a hearing on the redevelopment
Right,
plan.
and you're
this is it,
required
and
on
this
the
is it.
hearing for the rehabilitation designation. Sorry,
That's
I
it,
can't
and
talk
this
about
is it.
And this is it. And then the process is that the planning board then makes its recommendation back to the township?
Correct.
The township then adapts it?
Adopts it.
Adopts it?
Yes,
If they so see fit at that time?
yes.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused then, because on the agenda, the next item says it's a redevelopment plan for the same blocks and lots.
That's correct, which is the second piece to the puzzle.
But it hasn't been determined to, you're now holding the hearing whether or not to determine it should be determined a rehabilitation. And then that goes back to township. And before it's even been determined to be needed rehabilitation, you are looking at the redevelopment plan. Isn't that kind of out of sequence?
No. And as you indicated, both require governing body approval. So the board is making hearings and a recommendation. The governing body has the right to accept or reject either or both. And if they choose to accept the rehab and deny the redevelopment. That's one aspect that's within their purview. But the having of the hearings and the making of recommendations tonight is not out of sequence.
Doesn't it sort of imply, though, that the board had already made up its mind to say it was going to be a rehabilitation area? If you had already put on the agenda that you were going to look at the redevelopment plan for the same area?
No more than if you put a development application on it, you assume the board is going to approve it as well. And there's at least one developer's attorney sitting in the audience tonight who will tell you that if he was that easy, he wouldn't have to come.
But you develop...
Placing an item, sir, on the agenda does nothing more than place it on the agenda for consideration by the board. That's all. There is nothing magical about putting something on an agenda, making it an approval.
A builder for an application, you're telling me you would put on an agenda his application for the building on that lot and his application for amending it at the same time? Because the amendment would be based upon the approval?
Please.
What happens I mean, we do all the time, preliminary and final on the same agenda.
You answered the question, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, it's
Happens all the
same
time.
thing.
These are two different efforts that, for one thing, if there is a formal objection to
But
the
there's no
designation-
requirement that we approve what either or both.
That's correct. But there is a requirement that if you make a recommendation for redevelopment, for rehabilitation, and there is a formal objection, there can be no action taken for 45 days.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? this
Motion to close.
Anything on the left side over here?
evening? No,
Okay,
I
just
didn't say
check.
anything. So is there a motion?
Motion
to close? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the appropriate is a motion to approve the draft report of Ms. Beam as an area in need of rehabilitation for Block 163.05, lots 101, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
So moved.
Second. We have to do roll call?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Merdinger?
Yes.
Committeeman Delacroix?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bouchette?
Yes.
Mr. Latani?
Yes.
And Acting Chairman Wagner.
Yes. Okay. So next planning board business is a draft plan dated October 10th, 2014, New Amwell redevelopment plan, block 163.05, lots 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105, and presentation by Jennifer. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. So, in carrying along with what we were discussing in the prior hearing, similar in nature to a need of redevelopment designation, a redevelopment plan becomes the zoning for the property moving forward, whether it's a rehab designation or a redevelopment designation. As you may or may not remember, in 2010, the governing body adopted zoning, the ARW zone, Amwell Road West zone, which was required by the process, the COA process. When you have an affordable housing site, you're encouraged to zone for that property, and that was what was done for the project. That was incorporated in the housing plan in 2010. Given the change in the unit distribution that's being proposed from the 85 market rate to the 75 market rate, and the increase from the 20 apartments and 24 special needs units to 54 units up front, necessitated additional land area for that piece of the property, as well as a modification of some of the standards that were identified within the zoning, the Amwell Road West zoning from 2010. What this redevelopment plan does is it lays out the bulk standards that you typically see when a development application comes before you with respect to the variety of uses. So you have single-family units, you have townhouse units, you have affordable apartments, and then you have the supportive needs housing. And what this plan does is it lays out the framework by which a development application would be prepared and then ultimately presented to you. This is in no way a development application. It's simply the zoning standards under which a development application would be prepared. It maintains the permitted uses, the setbacks, the densities, the buffering, the parking requirements. And let me just be clear that the majority of those units, the apartments, the singles, and the towns are subject to RSIS and the parking requirements through RSIS. The special needs housing
Can you
is
just clarify what that is?
the residential site improvement standards, which is a statewide standard governing residential development, which would enable those developments to be, regulated consistently throughout the state. It regulates roadway widths, parking requirements, and things of that nature. And it was rolled out through the DCA, intended to ensure that residential development is regulated consistently. The supportive needs housing is a little different. So we have proposed some parking standards for just those specific, and really just the 2-bedroom units for the supportive needs, so which is a little less than typical, 0.5 spaces per unit. These are developmentally disabled adults. The majority of them don't drive. So the need to have 2 parking spaces per unit is really a waste of blacktop and coverage, and it's not really environmentally friendly. But that's basically what this plan does, is it rolls out those standards. If the board were to affirmatively recommend this to the committee and the committee were to adopt this plan would supersede the zoning, the Amwell Road West zoning, and become the zoning on the property. Again, I don't want to get into an affordable housing discussion, but because of the way that this came to us and the competitiveness in the tax credit program and the necessity for all the T's to be crossed and the I's to be dotted, the designation and the identification of the property in a redevelopment area such as this would enable more competitive proposals to secure those tax credit funding. It is a very competitive process. So that's what this plan is, and if anybody has any specific questions with respect to some of the standards, I'd be happy to go through them.
Okay, thank you. So we'll open up questions to the board first. Any questions for Ms. Beam on the redevelopment plan from the board?
Just, is there, from where we had been previously under the existing ARW, or whatever the zone was at the time, to where we are now, obviously we've had to adjust for the differences in the units and the types and the numbers. But from a standard perspective, is there anything material that?
It's relatively consistent. There are a couple of areas where there have been changes. As I said earlier, the area that for the upfront affordable housing piece has increased in size. I think it was like 2 acres, 1.5 acres in the old zoning. In this proposal, it's a minimum of 3 acres. We're probably in all likelihood looking closer to 4 acres. It's a bigger building because there's more units in it. As a result, the building is a little bit longer than what was proposed before. The coverage has increased incrementally, I would say, by 5%, but generally, it's pretty consistent.
Thank you. Any other questions for the board from the board at this point? Okay. Seeing none, we'll open up. I need a motion to open up to public.
So moved. Second.
Any questions from the public? Yes, sir. Please just come up, and I'll ask that you state your name and address again, just for the people at home. Thank you.
Howie Greenberg, 904 Merritt Drive. The thing you brought up in reference to parking, I live in a development that was granted us, I think, 1.25, 1.5 parking spots. We have trouble parking in our development. You said 2 bedrooms, 1.5 parking spots.
I said 2 bedrooms, 0.5 parking spaces, but those are only for the units that are supportive needs housing, the supportive needs homes, which are the developmentally disabled adults. The balance of the project, the units in the back,
right,
and the apartments have to comply with RSIS, and the parking spaces are regulated through the residential site improvement standards based upon the bedroom. So if it's a 1-bedroom unit, it's 1.8 parking spaces. If it's a two-bedroom
Well,
unit, it's about two
What
parking
is
spaces.
1.8 or 1.5? How do you get a car into a .8 parking spot?
It's a
Just a
ratio,
calculation.
and generally you take the number of units, you multiply it by the standard, and again, I want to reiterate, that's not a standard that I'm recommending, that's a statewide mandated
Well-
standard. Wait, can I just finish
Go
the
on.
answer first? You multiply that out. If you come up with a fraction, you have to round up. You can't have 0.1 parking spaces. So if 1.8 times 15 equals whatever 0.1, it goes up to the next parking space. Again, as I said, the residential site improvement standards is a statewide standard promulgated by the DCA, and it regulates all residential development. That's not something that I'm involved with. It's not something that the board really has control over. That's a statewide standard that you're obligated to utilize for residential development. But again, this is not a development application, so when the site plan and the subdivision application comes before the board, if you live within 200 feet, you would receive notice in the mail. Otherwise, it will probably be on the township's website, and it will be published in the newspaper. And at that point in time, you should come to the meeting, and they will have professionals, in all likelihood a traffic expert, who will discuss the traffic study, who will discuss the parking availability, and whether or not they need relief, they don't need relief, and that's something that the board at that time will deal with.
Now, do they also put in for visiting parking spots?
That is incorporated into those standards. It takes into consideration visitors when they
Part of
come
the site
up with
plan.
those standards.
Because in our development, even though it's private townhouses, we also had to put in disabled parking spots. Even though
They'll be required to have handicaps parking. That's
And-
what
We'll
we'll
and
have
have
those
to
would
bring
be-
that up at the meeting when
Yes.
they're going to discuss.
Correct.
The,
the
Yeah,
development
the issue here is this is just the standards that have to go into the zoning.
Correct.
And the standards were based on the state regulations. That's basically where
Well,
we
because
are.
I'm looking at a problem if there's, in that development where you only got one road coming out to Amwell Road, like in my development, if we didn't have Marshall Road to park on, we can't park all our cars in our development. Because I've been there for many years, and you have a two-bedroom where
Well, those
you
would
have a
be-
child,
yeah,
and
those
the
would be-
parents, they become a teenager, they get a car, what do you do with it?
Well, those would be questions, like Jennifer said, when we get to that point, you would want to come. Now, your development was already put in 20-some years ago, so we can't speak to that
30, yeah.
tonight.
30
years ago. Okay.
We really need you to come to
Mike-
site plan.
Mike was a young man then,
You
but,
should come when the
but that's
site plan-
So was
that's
I.
when you need to come.
Yeah.
To
Okay.
ask
I mean,
those
these are all
types of
very
questions,
legitimate
so.
issues
Sure.
that you're bringing up, and it's all things that need to be taken into consideration.
We just want to make sure we get you to the right meeting at the
Yes,
right time.
this is not the right.
So,
Yeah,
this is
You're a
not-
little ahead of the game.
Before they start doing anything?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This basically, just to maybe clarify for people, I'm reading down the list that is in this area, talking about mostly about setbacks, heights of buildings, impervious coverage, and density. Really, it's just to give the builders an envelope as to where they can fit the buildings in. And then they will have to then put the puzzle together and come in front of the board and the public and present how they made that puzzle go together with these constraints. Essentially is what we're looking at today.
And it's all based on state regulations.
Correct. Yes, sir. Just come up, state your name and address again, if you would.
You're welcome.
Jim Bergstrom, 78 Wurtsville Road. The impervious area, what % of this development will be impervious?
It depends on it's varying impervious areas depending on which type of housing you're using. And like I said, these are just maximums, so the site still has to be engineered. So even if it's a maximum of 55% for the apartment development or whatever it is, they still have to grade it, they have to have access, they have to have setbacks, so that's a max. And then, you have environmentally constrained areas in the back that need to be, staying away from, and there needs to be drainage, and so it hasn't been engineered yet. These are just maximums, and I can't give you an overall for the whole site because they're
not
various
engineered yet.
depending on the type of unit.
We just set the standard, that's all.
Okay.
We don't have a site plan in front of us.
I'm looking at these numbers. 65% seems a very high number for impervious.
Well,
That's
that's once they get to the buildable envelope. they also need to, like she said, they need to design it. So like surface water has to be designed in, and then the envelope gets smaller, and then they can do 65% inside the envelope.
So that is just a specific area around some of the development, and the overall site will be
Right. They take
will be
the
less than that?
Yeah, they take the whole thing, then they got to do surface water design, and then from there they get a buildable envelope, and then they go from there.
So that's I just want to be clear. So that 65% is really just specific to the area that could potentially be designated for townhouses. Townhouses is just one method that could theoretically be utilized on the back portion of this piece of property. And what that would do is it's all the roadways, it's all the buildings, it's all the driveways, but it's a max. So if they have to, as Mr. Burchett has indicated, if they have to provide drainage, they have to maintain setbacks from environmentally sensitive areas, they have to maintain buffers, they have to maintain setbacks from their side lot lines, you know, all those things chip away at the area, and then depending upon what's left, and they have to maintain circulation and those types of things, but that's just the max, and that's only for that one housing type.
And all that would be brought up at site plan.
Yeah.
Okay, when I just see a 65%
Oh, yes, I
number,
understand.
it's.
Yeah.
Fair
and
question.
These numbers are all within, like, the existing zoning, they're not outside of anything.
Well, this will be the zoning.
So are there major changes in zoning? Because you're adopting this zone, would be adopting this plan, you're adopting this as new zoning, right?
This will supersede the underlying zoning.
For that particular property.
Correct.
So what are the major changes that are going on in zoning here?
Well, the uses are the same.
I asked the same question.
As I said, the
About
uses,
10 minutes ago.
the distribution of the uses are the same. So it's apartments, supportive needs housing units, townhouses, and single family. As I said, the nature of the project has changed. So before, it was 85 market rate units, and it was a mix of townhouses and singles. And again, that was just conceptual to be put in a housing plan. It wasn't engineered. It didn't come before the board for approval. So, how many of which is unclear. That number has been reduced from 85 to 75. So that area, the land area, is going to be reduced. Before, there was only 20 apartments and 24 supportive needs units, so a total of 44 on an acre and a half. Now the minimum area is 3 acres because it's 54 units, and the building has gotten longer because of the unit types and what needs to be done inside the units for the supportive needs housing, et cetera. So the length of the building is a little bit longer. In some of the areas, most of the standards have maintained the same. Some of the coverage requirements have gone up by 5%, as I said, 10% maybe in certain circumstances, but again, that's a max, and it really has to be engineered before you really can see what we're dealing with in terms of the impacts. They're going to have to deal with that when they come before this board. They're not absolved of going through the process, making sure that their stormwater works, making sure the circulation works, trash, all that other stuff has to come up at site plan.
Slightly off of the topic, but when that might happen, where we'd be seeing the actual plans?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything at this point, so I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the public this evening? Yes, please come up, state your name and address.
One of the gentlemen asked about...
Just state your name and address again. I know.
William Trethewey.
Okay, thank you.
Trethewey, 1274 Millstone River Road, Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Thank you.
One of the gentlemen came up here and asked a question about traffic.
Yes.
You told him that's not something that you can look at this time?
Well, we're just doing the zoning. We didn't perform any traffic studies. The traffic studies would be part of the site plan and subdivision application that would come before the board. So that's not
Requirements
something.
for a redevelopment plan, item 1, is its relationship to define local objectives, its appropriate land use, density of population, and improved traffic and public transportation, public utilities, recreational community facilities, and other public improvements.
So what's your question?
When I looked through the draft plan, I didn't see any of those, so what are those items since they have to be included in the plan?
Well, when we looked at the site in 2010, their site suitability criteria established by the DCA, which is separate from the local housing and redevelopment law. And the site has to be on a public street, it has to have sewer and water, it has to have some semblance of access to public transportation that was historically really, really looked strongly upon, but as the reality has hit, that may or may not, come into play. But at the end of the day, this fronts on a major road in town, and that there are going to be access points along Amwell Road as was proposed in the conceptual plan that we adopted in 2008. This really is looking at overall another goal of municipal land use law and all different initiatives is to provide a variety of housing types. This is going to provide a variety of housing types, not only just the type of housing, but for varying socioeconomic areas. And so it does qualify under the local redevelopment housing law. I don't have to do a traffic study to be incorporated into a redevelopment plan.
I didn't say that. So you're saying that the plan from 2008 is part of this redevelopment plan?
No, what I'm saying is that we looked at the site suitability of the site in 2008, and the site meets the site suitability criteria.
Okay. I'm just a little confused because when I read through it, I could not find where those are in the plan that must be indicated in the plan. I must have missed it. You did go through pros plan. Let's see. You stated that there is no property that's planned to be acquired for this?
You can't.
Well, you can't acquire it on the domain, but there could be previous other ways towards it.
Well, I said that there was no eminent domain. I didn't say that there was no acquisition. There's no outlay of money from the township to acquire any of this property. This is being done by private landowners that have come to the table.
But the item 4 isn't if it's from the people. It says identification of any property within the redevelopment area which is proposed to be required in accordance with the redevelopment plan.
There's none.
Okay. Did you look, I didn't see in there that if this has any statement saying that it has no effect or what effect it has on other municipalities?
It's in the back.
Okay, I must have missed it in the draft. The draft is very hard to read because it's a copy of a copy of a copy that I got, so I'm sorry. I will put that. The last thing is, how did this redevelopment plan come in front of this committee? Was it referred by the township or the township asked you to develop it? From this board?
How did this become part of our plan? Is that, I'm not sure I understand your question.
How did you get, how did you become in the position to do the hearing for the plan, to get the plan? Because under the ordinance, there's 2 ways of which a planning board can get into the redevelopment business. One is if the township prepares a redevelopment plan and asks you to make comments. The other one is if the township refers a redevelopment plan to you after determination of an area of redevelopment. And those are in public law 40A:12A-7 paragraphs E or F.
Eric, I'll let you answer that one, since it was.
One, my recollection is it's a referral from the township committee.
That's correct.
And secondly, it's part of an ongoing part of our master plan.
But it was referred by the township committee, which according to this paragraph says after the adoption, it can be referred only for an area that's already been determined to be an area for redevelopment or so I'm still confused the process. It doesn't look like you're following the process of the law.
Well, we believe we are, sir, obviously, you know.
Okay. I believe you're not, and I would like to put a formal objection on the record at this time.
Are you a lawyer?
No.
Okay, I guess duly noted.
Duly noted.
I have been
Thank you.
involved with the planning process before.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public this evening? Seeing none, may I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, or we have to do roll call for that?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So next, I guess, there would be a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bertinger. Roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Moringer?
Yes.
Committeeman Delphor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Burchett?
Yeah.
Mr. Lapani?
Yes.
Acting Chairman Wagner?
Yes. Special committee reports. I do not.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm sorry, I almost forgot about you. Special committee reports, I do not have any. Any business from the floor on items that were not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Considerations of ordinances, I do not have any. We do have a public hearing, a subdivision site plan application. Thank you, gentlemen. For Claremont Towers, file 14PB10 MSRV, block 162.22, lot 44, and block 16301, lot 102 through 174 and 776-779 East Drive. Application is seeking minor site approval, bulk variance for accessory structure in front yards, and waiving environmental impact reports permissions to install 3 generators.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Catherine Kopp from the Law Office of Peter U. Lanford on behalf of the applicant. We will do our best to keep this brief considering the late hour at this point.
We can't guarantee that it won't extend.
But thank you.
No, it's only quarter to 10. Or quarter to 10.
Just really quickly, in summary, the site currently has 3 7-story apartment buildings on the 2 different lots. The apartment buildings all have emergency generators currently located in the basement of each building. These generators are used to provide electricity to light the hallways, power the elevators, and provide electricity to the fire alarms when the general power is out. As stated in Chief Fire Marshal Christopher Weninger letter of November 5th, 2014, the subject property has been affected by a number of power failures over the last few years, which has caused the generators to be used. Per that letter, the operation of the generators causes a dangerous buildup of carbon monoxide in the buildings. As a result, we are here today in order to seek approval to remove the generators from the basement and relocate them to the exterior of the building. This relocation brings us here for site plan approval and request for variance because the generators are proposed to be put in the front yard, which is prohibited by ordinance. And on that, I will call my first witness.
Bless you. Thank you. Bless you. And you need to be sworn in? Is that correct, Mr. Reinstein?
Yes, he does. Testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your name, spell your last name, and indicate your credentials, sir.
Certainly. Name, first initial F, Mitchell Ardman, A-R-D-M-A-N. I'm a Vice President and Principal of the Reynolds Group. Address is 626 North Thompson Street in Raritan. I've been a licensed professional engineer for 25 years now. I'm also a licensed professional planner. I've appeared before boards throughout the state. My last appearance before this board was approximately a year ago on a county site plan application.
Okay.
You can be seated if you'd like to. He's got stuff to show us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just request that Mr. Ardman be accepted as an expert witness for tonight's purposes.
Yes, I think that would be fine.
Thank you. Okay, and can you explain to the board the property as it currently exists?
And we just have to mark that, and
Certainly.
if you'd like to set it up on the...
Sure.
So this is our overall site plan, SP1, with just a few areas highlighted on it. And A1.
A1. Yep. And you can set it up on the wall over there so that people at home can get a view of it as well.
I see our substitute stenographer showing, videographer.
Yes, I know, I got the real one. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it.
So as described, there's 3 existing buildings. Orton Road's in the middle of the site. North is generally up and to the left here. So the 3 separate buildings as described, we have building number 3 to the top of the sheet, building 5 to the left, and building 6 to the right. They're on properties that are basically fully developed. These properties were part of basically a PUD that was built in the late 70s with this full area development. Along with those buildings, there are parking lots on each site that I'm outlining for each of the buildings, building 5, building 6, and Building 3, the parking lots that surround them, the property lines that show up in blue around each property. Splitting Buildings 5 and 6 also is Eve Drive. What we have shown on the plan here, I've circled around it. It's due to the small nature of the generators. You see the small highlighted areas to Buildings 5 is basically to the top side of the building, to the Orton Road side. Same to the Building 6 is to the Orton Road side. And to Building 3 is in the parking lot, again in the front to the Orton Road side. As was described, there's been a problem over the years, which has been cited by your fire official, carbon monoxide buildup in the basement. It's caused a problem. You need it on when the power's out, but when the power's out, it causes a problem. So conflicting goals of the life safety features of the generator. Basically, these are relatively small-scale generators. They're 30 kW generators. So they're just at about 47 inches high, and they're 4 feet by 8 feet. So many of you have my partial house generators at 10 kW. So it's there are other house generators I know in my neighborhood 20 kW. So it's more on the size of a a large house generator than some you see that will fire up full buildings and full institutional properties. So relatively small scale. As I said,
what are you replacing? What was the generators you had in the basement? How many kW were they?
The same. Yes. And just for knowledge, we have our mechanical engineer here tonight. I developed a site plan. If you start getting technical on the generators, I'll be glad to turn it on to him. But we've worked together, and I'm pretty familiar with these and what we have. They're going to be natural gas-fired generators. They're going to be on concrete pads that we put out on the site. We're also going to have level 2 sound attenuating enclosures.
Okay.
These enclosures, and it's cited on the plan, and the specs are on there as well. Basically, these enclosures, the manufacturer's spec will be down to 63 decibels, dBAs at 23 feet away from the enclosure. These we're only going to run in case of emergency, or they're usually set up on a weekly run basis. They should change the times. I think every one is set for Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the state, so we should probably adjust those. But once a week, they usually run for 15 minutes to a half hour is the typical run time on those, during the day only. So with that, they will meet the township noise criteria, and there will not be an issue with noise from these generators. So once again, as you heard, they're going to just fire up the lighting, the elevator, and the fire alarms in the building, which is the critical life safety features in the building. Again, as for the variance, it's because we're in front of the building in the front yard. They're not in the front yard setback for an accessory use, but they are in front of the building. And as from a planning situation, they're there for 2 reasons, basically. We have to get them out of the building, as we discussed, and also we put them in a location which is closest to the existing mechanical rooms and panels inside the buildings. That's the most practical location to put these, so we can backfeed the power into those mechanical rooms in the building. They're going to be shielded from sight from the adjoining public, specifically on Orton Road, with a series of landscaping which we've shown on our plan. We also went to the Environmental Commission, and they suggested fencing, and the owner is amenable to adding fencing to help screen these as well. I do want to point out there's only one spot, and we'll fence as much as we can, but the generator on the building here I'm pointing to, that one's in an island, and there's requirements for the generator for access to get to the doors and open up. So if there's one side that we can have a full fence there, we will screen as much as practical that we can get on all the other sides, but we're hoping to get fencing around the entire generator. Again, as for the variance, the placement, again, in support of the variance is that it is the best planning option for placement on the site. And in regards to land use law, and I don't use this often in my testimony, I think it's overused, but for For the health, safety, and welfare, this one is truly for health, safety, and welfare because it's to generate the building and also because of the condition that's inside the building, by taking them outside satisfies that condition. So for those reasons, I think this is an appropriate location for these on site. I don't believe there's any impact to the zone plan or the zone scheme. And as far as the other testimony, you often hear on these, there's really no stormwater impact. There's such a small scale. No lighting required on these, no traffic generation. So I don't believe there's any negative impacts to the township with this, and I believe you can approve the site plan and the variance for these 3 generators we're proposing.
Okay, and just to clarify, there will be bollards around each of the generators, correct?
Yes, we'll also place bollards for safety.
Okay, and as far as you're aware, is an air quality permit required by the DEP for these generators?
No, they should be of a small enough scale that no permit is required for that.
They were under the 1 million BTU?
Yes.
Okay, and have you reviewed the staff reports?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and can we comply with all of the requested revisions?
Yes.
Okay, with the exception of potentially the one side of the one fence?
Right.
Okay. And I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay. Any questions from the?
I just have a comment. I was personally involved with our emergency services, helping the building out during the storms, and I'm glad to see you're putting the generators outside. That's great.
Having probably responded to over 100 fire alarms there as a volunteer fireman, and mostly for smoke alarms, which has all been corrected. I'm very happy to see that it's being taken care of, and it's definitely a safety thing. Sorry, thank you.
I just have one question. It's more particular to the...
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I don't know the number of the building the furthest to the north, up above, where that generator is, and you're talking about putting a fence there. Is there a restriction of sight for that, for the parking, people coming in and out of that?
We'll take the, I don't believe so. We won't put it, it won't need to be right up at the intersection for the drive that I'm showing closest to Autumn Road here, and this is Building 3, so I don't think that'll be restriction. And we'll make sure when we put it along the drive here, that is the location where it might be tight for a fence with access to the unit, so we'll keep that in mind as well for the placement. We'll, make sure the town engineer takes a look at that.
The other thing I was just thinking, because I used to snowplow those buildings there,
okay.
And I can tell you that there's no place to put the snow, and those I would really make sure, because I know snow plowers aren't always the most kindest things, that you want to reinforce as much as you can around those generators, as far as plows blowing through that area and pushing snow.
That's why we agreed for the metal bollards to her protection for...
Well, just the bollards won't protect the snow.
Of the snow itself.
The snow itself,
Plowing
because coming into that area,
right.
There's really very no place to push that snow.
Right.
And, you know, we have one plow come through with everything pushed to the right, you may blow that fence right out and then damage your generator.
We'll keep an eye on that. But.
Good point. Any other questions, members of the board? Do we have to do public? A motion to open public?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any comments from motion, from members of the public?
No public left.
Seeing none? Is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Is there any other witnesses that you need to bring up or anything to talk about before?
No, I believe we covered everything.
The 30K and all that sort of.
And unless someone has a technical question that you would like our mechanical engineer to answer.
I don't think so. I think.
I believe we are finished.
Okay, so I guess we'll have do a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
This is a motion to approve application 14PB10-MSRV Claremont Towers with all conditions and requirements set forth by the various staff reports and the testimony of applicant's engineer.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Julian?
Yes.
Mr. Merger?
Yes.
Committeeman Delcor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Bouchette?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Acting Chairman Wagner?
Yes. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, gentlemen.
Should have had you guys go first.
I'm sure they.
Yeah, I
Like
would
that.
wish they'd gone first, too.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
How was the library?
Quiet.
Good.
Okay, next is correspondence, which I don't believe we have any. And the next would be a motion for
moved.
adjournment.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Next meeting.